Welcome to our celebration of International Women's Day today. It's an honor to be a host for this event. This webinar is a part of the Customer Experience and Support Superhero series that our marketing team here at Netomi runs on a monthly basis. We will drop a link at the bottom of the hour where either you can sign up or follow to be invited to the next event. Let me start off by wishing all the women on this call a very happy International Women's Day. May you continue to shine on and celebrate your authentic self, and we continue to make space for other women along the way in our journey. So before we get started, let me quickly introduce myself. My name is Rupal Nishar. I'm the VP of Customer Success here at Netomi. For those of you who are new to the Netomi family, Netomi is an AI customer service platform, a relationship operating platform that makes it easy to build and design incredible customer experiences and personalized engagements that are aligned with your brand, voice, and identity. Before we kick this off, I'd love to hear from the audience as well. I'd love to hear where you're joining from. So please drop it in chat, what city, what country you're joining in from. So the theme for International Women's Day this year is to break the bias. Now, break the bias can mean different things to each one of us that's listening in. Everything from gender, age, race, parenthood. There's a laundry list of what these biases look like that we see every single day. Some of them are seen, some of them are not seen. So both conscious and unconsciously, we play into these biases that feed into our ecosystems and build into our DNA every day. However, I'm a firm believer that together, with very hard reflections, transparency, and honest conversation, we can truly move the needle to forge a path towards a very diverse and equitable and inclusive environment, no matter where we are, whether it's at work, at home, at different spaces. A way of thinking and being where we celebrate and value the differences. So today we have a panel of leaders who are breaking the glass ceiling and are leading from the front in the customer experience and the customer success industry from all around the world to share with us their experiences that have helped shape their paths. And I'm delighted to introduce the panelists to you. We have Tanya Hoke, who is the Director of Digital Products at Rogers Sports and Media. We have Anastasia Zadorviak, Director of Customer Experience at DoorDash. From UIPath, we have Laura Laquara, a Customer Success Leader, Senior Manager. Charlotte Ward, Head of Support at Snowplow Analytics and the founder of Customer Support Leaders Podcast. So let's take a moment, and I'd like to give our panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves and share with us a life lesson with the audience. And for the audience too, it would be great to hear from you a life lesson that you live by that has shaped your career or has shaped your life in some way. So please drop it in the chat, and I will start with Anastasia. Anastasia, would you introduce yourself and tell us a life lesson?
Thank you so much. Nice to virtually meet everyone. Thank you for joining. I'm Anastasia, and I lead customer experience at DoorDash right now. And a little bit about me, I started my career in management consulting and then moved to strategic marketing, and then had the honor to join DoorDash 3 years ago when we were just about to start building customer experience. And so I was very lucky to be a part of the team and to lead the team that was defining what is customer experience for us, what we think it should be, and how we want to be seen by our customers, by our users. And so for me, customer experience is just about communication, which is a huge challenge when it comes to big business, when it comes to tech business. But this is the most interesting part. And the most interesting part is to be able to operate at this scale, yet create personalized experiences and stay close to the users and to the employees who are also an essential part of the experience. I think life lesson, or like the lesson I live by, is lead with strong voice and empathy at the same time. I think I'm trying to find the right combination of both. I think empathy is essential when you work in the experience industry. It's also a huge source of learnings. But then at the same time, you need to have strong voice if you want to lead in innovative space. And if you want to, define the direction, create the experiences, do something new. And this is what I think is essential to women's success in general in career. So that probably would be my best summary.
That's fantastic. Tanya.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me part of this conversation. I think this is a great initiative to start talking about, women heroes, like we say, and also to break the bias that we have in the industry, specifically in my industry where I come from, which is technology, digital product. So it's great to be part of it, and thank you so much, Rupal, for inviting us. A little bit of a background about me. So I started in the digital field going back to 2008. So I started with the aviation industry. So I worked for Emirates, where I was looking after the digital products in their portfolio, where customer experience obviously plays a huge part. At that time, we were looking at websites, and then we entered into the app world when people started changing, the way they consume information, the way they interact with products. And then I moved to Canada from Dubai, and that's when I again entered in the aviation industry. So I started working for WestJet, and WestJet also I was looking at different digital products. I was looking after the apps. We launched a new customer service initiative or a new customer service platform, I would say rather, with Netomi, which is building the AI bot, which is transformational for WestJet. And I was leading that project. And now I'm working with Rogers, again, looking after all the digital products that fall under the media portfolios, essentially websites, apps, anything that we do in the customer service area around AI. I'm leading that portfolio. It's so important to keep the users and the consumers in mind when we define digital products, although we're not in direct connection with them. When I compare ourselves to like call centers, you're always constantly looking for what is it that sells for the user, what is it that doesn't work, what is the pain point, and how we can solve that through our products by driving convenience. In terms of my life lesson, I go back to this saying that you hear often, and I'm hoping that you'll hear more often when we start flying again. When you're sitting on the airplane, that says, put your oxygen mask first before you put it for others. So that's my life lesson, like take good care of yourself first. Make sure that you're enjoying the work that you're doing. Make sure that you're able to look after yourselves, whether it's a spa day, just taking a break from the kids, not doing cooking, cleaning, all of the ones that we ladies have generally an OCD for. Like, just keep that aside, take care of yourself, make sure you're happy and content before you start bringing your full self to your professional or your personal life, because that's super important for you to be able to function and to be able to, give back to whether it's your people, your family, your community, your work. So that's my life lesson.
That's phenomenal, Tanya. I love the customer centricity in what you're doing, and then, real tangible things that you can apply to your in your life to take care of yourself, right? It's a very simple but powerful truth. Let's hear it from Laura. Laura.
Hi, everyone. Happy International Women's Month. Thank you all for joining, and thank you for having me on this panel. So a bit about me. One of my first jobs in college was actually in a call center for Westgate Resorts. I haven't told a lot of these stories from that time, but just to know about me is I ended up losing that job and leaving after I ended up having too long of conversations with every customer and getting to know them way too well and not selling. So no go for the call center agent and sales of resort packages. But what that did is it launched an entire career in events and marketing. I then leveraged my MBA to get into the tech industry. And so for the last almost 8 years, I've been in the tech industry on both the enterprise sales side and then customer success. And so most recently, I'm a customer success manager for UIPath, and UIPath does automation for your everyday tasks within your computer. So you can build a bot and you can actually build it yourself, or you can have someone develop for you within IT to automate some of those day-to-day tasks. So there'll be a lot more I'll be sharing about that in our conversations going forward. But my life lesson, I love this question. And one of the things that took me a really long time to learn was how to have less judgment. I came out, moved to New York City in my 20s from St. Louis, Missouri, had a lot of opinions how everyone should be and how life is best. And what I've learned, especially for women, no matter the path that any of us take or what our choices are, they're meant to be celebrated. So celebrating your company launch, celebrating and doing a gender release for something totally different, and a new announcement, job changes, potty training, new babies, all of it should be celebrated. And each personal choice is an individual. And so by doing that, it allows you to have a very rich life, but it also supports and creates a layer for all of us to achieve whatever personal goal that we're trying to reach for the year. Thank you, Rupal.
So thank you, Laura. And Charlotte, off to you.
Thank you, Rupal. Thank you for having me. Thank you for including me in such an awesome panel on a day of celebration of women across the world, doing all sorts of things, but here particularly for women in CX, right? Because we're awesome, aren't we? And a little bit of introduction to me then. I'm Charlotte. I'm currently head of support at Snowplow. Snowplow is a behavioral data management platform. We allow organizations to collect and operationalize behavioral data at scale. So we allow companies to develop their own use cases around their own bespoke data requirements, enrich it, gather it, enrich it, push it out to your data warehouse, and from there do all sorts of amazing things with it. Aside from, I've been at Snowplow for 2 years. Aside from that, my other support life, as it were, is the Customer Support Leaders podcast, which I have been running a little over 2 years now. We're up to something like 240 episodes, and I've spoken to about 70 or so other support leaders around the world, and it's just my favorite thing.
That's brilliant, Charlotte. I'll sum this up with my advice, which I think I continue to tell anybody that is in my network, and I even tell my kids this, is that give yourself permission to fail and give yourself permission to succeed. More often than not, we stand in our own way and our biggest critique. It's okay to fail, but learn quickly from the failures and pivot quickly, right? So you have to give yourself permission to do both those things and get out of the way for success to happen, because it's never going to be a linear path to success. Having said that, let's talk about some of the content that I know that is top of mind for the audience. So let's talk about the G word, the gender gap, right? We know this, and studies after studies across continents, across geographies, through various respectable established metrics and voices and publications, the story is the same. The gender gap is real, especially this is obvious and prevalent when it comes to women in leadership roles, in management roles. There is a huge power gap. And despite the slow, but I want to say the steady progress that we've made towards the gender equality, I believe that in the past year or two, this progress has been eroded. And as a result of the global pandemic, we've seen some of these initiatives or some of these things that have led to this gap being a lot wider, right? So Charlotte, since you've run your podcast, which is 250 plus episodes, which is pretty phenomenal, and you've had an opportunity to speak with personas that are in leadership across genders, across geos, I'd love to learn from you or hear from you. How real is this gap, and what do you think are some of the reasons for it?
I think the gap is very real, actually. And it's not just a salary gap. I think it's an opportunity gap. I think it's a sort of a growth gap, really. Actually, it's how we experience the organizations that we're working inside. Whatever that organization is affected by our gender, and I think that is a true statement. However diverse an organization you happen to be employed inside, however diverse your customer base is, how, you know, all of these things, we are our own true selves. And I think that part of who we are is our gender, and part of, like, honestly, we're all human beings. How people react to us obviously is affected by the person that we present as well, the personality that we present to the world. I think that the gap, as I see it, is affected by a couple of things, actually probably several things, but I think the biggest one I find is transparency. I think what's really interesting to me is that women are great, particularly young women, I have to say, are great at being like authentic and transparent with each other in a safe space with other women. But we don't really get that authentic and transparent in the presence of men. And I would also say that I think men don't necessarily become that authentic and transparent with us in terms of things like talking about the impact on our opportunities, the impact on our, you know, whether the glass ceiling really exists, if it's a thing. We don't necessarily acknowledge, I think, as a society sometimes, that these gaps and barriers are there because of our gender. When it comes to talking about salaries, you know, we just don't talk about salary differentials a great deal. There are some great companies out there being very transparent about their salaries, but less and less. I think truly not as many as we think there are. And so in my experience, I think it's something about like transparency across the divide that I think is needed.
I think that is so authentic, Charlotte. I think that resonates with me as an individual in my career as well. I'd like to pivot to Tanya and ask Tanya, you've had the opportunity to work with some of the biggest brands in your career, right? Such as WestJet, Emirates, now Rogers. What do you think the company culture plays in all of this, in minimizing the gap? And how do you think that the folks tuned in today can adopt some of the practices or advice that you have?
Yeah, for sure. I just want to start with, like, I don't think there's any question, especially in the tech industry, women are in the minority, right? If you just look at the general workforce, it ranges between 25 to 30%. And then if you add women of color to that mix, for example, that number reduces even more. And then it also reduces even more as you go up higher in the ranks. So in the leadership roles, there are less and less women are there that are there in the digital or in the tech world. But I've been fortunate to work for organizations that actually see this difference and have put in a lot of processes and procedures in place to actually make sure that, you know, that we can reduce, or we can, you know, shorten or, you know, reduce that number in some fashion. And there's a lot that companies can do in terms of even setting up, you know, hard and fast rules, like setting I&D targets, you know, or DEI targets, which is diversity, inclusion, and equity targets, that we need to hire X number of people. And this is not just for women, but also for in our world, you know, for indigenous cultures, for, you know, people of color, for women. So at Rogers, we have that. We actually have a metric. Each leader has a metric that they need to abide by. They need to hire X number of people or have X number of diversity in their team. The other thing that we are often very conscious about, you know, especially in the meetings, is unconscious bias. So generally, when you're in a meeting and you have, and in the tech world, it's very common. You've got a lot of men that are there in the room, and generally, when a woman starts to talk or give her opinion or share her, you know, her side of the story, it's generally seen as, it's either, you know, in terms of the voices that you hear in the room, it's low because the representation is small, but somehow someone always interrupts and kind of talks over. So just understanding that there is an unconscious bias that's happening, and then actually calling that out. I actually had a leader that would actually say, hey, you know what, let's give her an opportunity to talk. What does she have to say at the table? And if there's someone else that's interrupting, no, let her finish. Simple things, basic things, but that often happens, which you don't see. The other thing that I see that we women do a lot is, in a room full of people, you know, a lot of us don't sit at the table. Like, we're always the one who's like, hey, let's give my chair to this other person. I'm going to be standing at the back, and not actually be present in the conversation. Although we have a lot of, you know, insights, experience that we bring to the table, it's very important to actually be seated at the table. So you're seen as someone who can actually provide that input. And the last one that I would say, going back to my second point, is just having male champions. and understanding, male mentors that can actually help you kind of pave the path for you, because that's important for you as well. Just for someone to say, hey, she's got something to say, let's give her an opportunity. I see her as someone who can, take the next step in her career. Let's give her that opportunity, because we are in a world or
I think we may have Tanya. We may have lost Tanya there for a brief moment. I think she'll dial back. Let's give it a brief moment. And in the meantime, I think I'd like to hear from Anastasia. Anastasia, your growth trajectory is pretty impressive. I mean, just looking at your trajectory within DoorDash has been phenomenal, right? You went from being a senior manager to a director in like less than 3 years. Like, what's your advice to everyone in the audience today around accelerating growth and making your way to the top?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for asking. I think Tanya is back, so I can either answer or let her finish because I haven't started yet.
I apologize. I don't know where I left off, but I think I almost finished when I got off my internet connection for some reason. So you can continue, Anastasia.
Okay, well, thank you, because I want to start with like plus 100 to everything that Tanya said. I completely agree. And maybe like to answer the question, I will need to refer to what she was sharing, because this is, I think there are two components basically. First is how you manage your career and how you approach things at work in your career. And second is the environment. And the environment has to be there. So this is where I'll start, because Tanya, you shared a lot of very practical things about how companies can create space and can support growth for their female employees. And this is what I want to definitely mention as I'm talking about DoorDash. So we have exact same approach in terms of diversity and inclusion, having goals in terms of hiring, having goals in terms of promoting people. We have the committee that kind of analyzes how we're doing as a company, if we have right representation when it comes to planning, I don't know, the year, the quarter, if we have enough different leaders in the room in terms of gender, in terms of background, and so on and so forth. And it has to be there. So I think it's amazing that more and more companies are paying a lot of attention to this aspect and to the problem of not having equal opportunities for different candidates, starting with gender. And so I would say, like, if there are a couple of advices that I could give, is like, start with looking for the right place for you, somewhere where you will be able to strive, and you won't need to constantly fight with the system, with the environment. And then the second thing is everything that all of the attendees already mentioned in the chat. There are so many great advices there. And it's something that I think I can openly say this, that women do need to speak up more, to be more confident when it comes to taking on bigger challenges, say no to something that they've already, accomplished and learned, because oftentimes the problem is that women tend to do it all, and to carry so much on their shoulders. And as you grow, you need to be able to delegate that and be more confident in what you want and what you deserve. So all of that, all the self-esteem, all the self-respect, ability sometimes to definitely supporting others. Something that Tanya mentioned as well is like calling out that somebody's interrupting and helping your colleague to be heard, but then doing it for yourself as well, and not shy out of sometimes saying, I would like to finish my thought, or I do still insist on something that you truly believe in. Probably very basic things. but I think we all realize them. It's though difficult to always act in line with these little rules.
Yeah, absolutely. It is certainly the small things, the actions that matter. I think when I was making a decision to move to Netomi, I think I had multiple different offers, and the singular most reason that was a decision criteria for me was what was the leadership like, right? Period. Everything else was a secondary in my evaluation. And from the first week that I've been here, I think I've seen my CEO pause at meetings and ask me, you've been quiet, what view do you have? Just that small gesture has such a huge impact on my confidence level that he actually genuinely does notice if I'm not speaking up, right? It matters and makes a whole lot of difference. That makes me feel like I owe my allegiance to this person for at least considering that I am here as part of the table, right? And I can exercise my voice, and I should, who continues to help me give more shape to my voice. So I think I absolutely resonate with everything that's being said from all of you. So speaking of roles in tech and proportion of women, Laura, you've been working in the automation and tech adoption space for quite some time, and automation and tech adoption are traditionally spaces that are, dominated by men. Like, how do you break into the leadership space there? And it may not be just from a leadership, from a title perspective, but from an influence perspective, right? These are industries that are very sparsely sort of in the radar for women, right? Like, it's something that women run away from when they think about, oh my gosh, I can't do AI or I cannot do automation. What is your advice for women who are in similar industries or are even thinking about breaking into this space?
It's a great question, and thank you for asking it of me. I think there's multiple pathways to getting this done, and you have to leverage them depending on the environment that you're in. Number one thing is investing in yourself and making sure that you are putting yourself out there to have that opportunity. And so investing in yourself could be getting the technical acumen you need. You don't have to be doing the technical development or execution. You just need to have the acumen and be able to speak to it. And you can do that by leveraging the really brilliant people around you and cross-sharing just learnings together. I oftentimes would pull an engineer in the room and go on a whiteboard and work together, mapping out a client solution and a recommendation, because I've had experience both presenting that internally, but then externally with customers. The second piece of this is investing in yourself by paying for the things that you need. You need help with speaking and getting your story and presentation stronger. Pay someone to help you. You want help with your resume, with your cover letter, with your interviewing. Have someone, get a business coach, executive coach, and go to women communities to find those. One of the mistakes I felt I always made earlier on in my career is I didn't always pay for the coaching I needed. And I would say the top people, the top executives, the CEOs out there have coaches and executive coaches to help them. So whether you're in school, whether you're outside, investing that money will help you negotiate better, will pay forward in what you're able to close in your offers, and it will mean a lot in terms of how you grow. And then finally, being really clear. You've got to be really intentional. And everyone has spoken to this, intentional with the places you work at, as well as intentional at what you want and being really clear. I haven't always been able to define that, but I talk to people to figure out how to define that. I haven't always worked in great environments, and I worked how to get as much leverage as I could from those environments, and then worked, like Rupal said, at Netomi to find a place that had that pathway, or I could come in that pathway. For example, at SoftBank, I came in as an IC, built out their customer success, and then ended as an associate director. And so I built 2 CS teams, and it was over time that I articulated my interest in leading, and I raised my hand. And then the most important piece of this is leading before you have the opportunity. It's saying yes and going beyond, asking what's important. I've even had this conversation just recently. I love to invest time, problem solve, and I raise my hand probably too much on activities because I want to see this company succeed. I want to see the customer succeed, and I myself love what I do. And with that, you have to really focus your energy at that, what's going to matter in that leadership position. So always ask the question and get someone to sponsor you. And I'll close with this. When I go back to my life lesson, sometimes I'm not always able to brag for myself in the right way. You want your sponsors, your executives talking about you. Find those people to celebrate and share the things across and ask them. You'll be surprised. They want you to stay. They want to retain you. And leadership opportunities come to those that are vocal and visible and leverage other people to help them.
Yeah, that's invaluable. I think I've heard a lot in the industry speak these days is there's a difference between being a mentor and a cheerleader. You want to find the cheerleader. You want to find your board of directors that's going to be there and represent you when you aren't there necessarily. So
exactly.
I love that advice, Laura. I think that's absolutely critical. A fun question, and I think I'll open this up to Laura and to actually all our panelists. If you had to automate one habit or skill which every woman should adopt to realize their full potential, what would it be?
I would automate a negotiation bot that helped with multiple things. Number one, it would consider the pay, but it would consider location, industry, titles, and other preferences, because your negotiations change as you evolve in your career and your personal life evolves. And so getting you the statements and taking all the data, automation is all about the data, rather than you going out asking people, well, don't search those websites. It just automatically said you could go 20% more here, ask for 10% more here in your base. Oh, and then don't forget about that maternity leave package or that vacation you need, those types of things, because it's really important to get as much as you can at that initial negotiation stage.
That is absolutely invaluable. I think that's great. It reminds me a little bit about that game called Deal or No Deal, where they open it up and they're like, nope, no deal. Let's move on to the next mathematical conclusion. That makes sense. I'd love to hear from the audience as well at this point of time. If you have a life hack you want to share with the rest of us, we would certainly love to learn from you. So please drop it in the chat. And I will move on to the poll. Let's see. I'm going to launch a poll. I'd love for everybody to chime in. And I'll give everybody about 15 seconds or so to respond to this. Let's make it 30 seconds.
Rupal, while everybody's thinking about that poll, I have an automation that if anyone in the audience can do this for me, I would love. Can I tell you what it is? It's a brag bot. I would love a brag bot. Somebody's a way of gathering all of my positive stories that happen during the day and during the week, and I don't have to make the effort to document all of the good things that I do every day and all of the achievements. And I have to put effort into that now, as we all should. We should all be identifying little achievements and writing them down, so that when we get to that 6 months review, or when we get that opportunity in an unexpected moment, you've got a list of things to call on. And it reminds you, it changes your perception of how you're doing, and it certainly changes your ability to talk about that to the outside world. But it takes effort. It takes so much effort to say, oh, that's the thing I should put in my brag log. I've got a brag log, by the way. That's the thing I should make a note of over there. I would love just for something that sweeps those up for me during the day.
Yeah, that is so true. So actually, I've done this in the past where actually 15 minutes set on my calendar on every end of the week perspective, and reflecting on what went well, what didn't go well. So everything that didn't go well would fall into people, process, technology. What do we need to change? And then from things that did go well, what do we need to do? And then what does that tell me about me, right? So I think that goes into sort of the brag thing, but we have to be more intentional about it. I absolutely love it, Charlotte. And I think I learned some of these strategies. I read this book about brag. It's called The Art of Tooting Your Own Horn Without Blowing It. There's a really great book. I can drop it here in the chat a little bit later towards the end. And I'm looking at the poll right here, about 96% of the folks have said that they have come across the situation where a woman is strong and assertive is labeled as bossy. I know I have seen this, I've heard it. I think I've heard things such as tone it down and you don't need to brag about yourself. And this is the funniest thing ever. Like, this is something that I have heard where, I'm not sure if you're familiar with this statistic. BBC did a gender study, and as part of the gender study, they found 90% of the people, not men, people are biased against women. This includes women, right? So I've actually been told by women directly, not to toot my own horn. So that's something, right, that is pretty significant from what we normally hear across the board, right? So thank you for everybody that did participate in the poll. I think we appreciate your input, and I'd love an opportunity for to hear directly from the panelists as well, some that are seeing this on a regular basis, right? Because we, as leaders in customer experience and customer success, we continue to see that times are where customers are demanding a lot more, right? And where the volume of work is significant, and skills such as empathy and EQ are essential, right? And there are hundreds of studies across the board that say that empathy and EQ come naturally to women. And I'm not saying that isn't true or untrue, but that really leaves a little wiggle room for women to be assertive, let alone bossy, which is a whole different spectrum. But I want to say it out loud that it's not just these soft skills that women bring to the table. So I think it's important to break this cycle, this perception, starting with each one of us here in this conversation, right? And give ourselves permission to be assertive, permission to say no, permission to challenge what's being mentioned. So having said that, I'd love to hear from Anastasia and Tanya next. Both of you have run customer experience programs at your respective organizations. What do you think are the key skills that are going to help women make the transition into these leadership roles? And we'll start with Anastasia.
Yeah, so talking about hard skills, I think my number one for customer experience would be analytical skills. I think those are just a necessity when it comes to customer experience, because basically the way I think about experience or creating experience, it's all about understanding what is important to customers. So hearing them. In order to understand what's important, you need qualitative feedback, which is basically empathy and building channels and like literally talking to customers and hearing them. And let's say, and that is empathy is a soft skill. So the second portion will be quantitative data to actually interpret the feedback you're getting. And that is all analytical. That is the data that you need to be able to read. Ideally, you want to be able to work with it because it gives you a deeper view instead of just, asking your analytics team to prepare the report and then ask them to tell you what it means. So I find it instrumental. Plus, I think that to your point about challenges that women face in their career at work is this challenge of either like not getting room at the table, not being heard, being interrupted, and not being heard even when they speak up. So I oftentimes observe situations when the person, my colleague or someone would speak up, say something, and then there is like the silence, especially if this is the opposite opinion or like an alternative opinion. And then everyone is like, yeah, thank you for sharing that. Okay, let's move on. And then they just return to like their agenda, sort of. So in all of those situations, analytical skills are actually very helpful, because instead of referring to your opinion and repeating again and rephrasing, you can refer to data. This is something very tangible, something that is very hard to argue logically. And for women can be a really good, like a base to hold to and use in challenging situations where they don't feel that their opinion or their like experience is not necessarily heard or valued at the same level. So that would be my number one, I would think.
I think that's invaluable, Anastasia. Tanya, would you like to share?
Yeah, no, absolutely. That was great. And that was actually my point as well. When it comes to, hard skills that you need to get good at is being objective. So instead of looking at opinions, this is going to work, or I think this is the way to do it, you actually look at data and analytics to actually help you make that decision. But with it comes like also empathy, especially if you're working, in a large project where there are different stakeholders, coming to the table, and potentially maybe, I'm assuming in this case, you're probably the one, and not just looking at women, but just in general, you're probably the one that is armed with information that not necessarily everyone has. So empathizing that you've got this information, this is how you're going to be using it, you appreciate everyone else, what they bring to the table. This is our superpower, empathy. So let's just use it. Also having the hard skill, which is just like what Anastasia mentioned, is make sure that we have the analytical skills and go back to data. The second thing that I would say in my line of work is understanding the technology that you're building on, which is super important, which is not necessarily something a lot of females are, like choose their career path as. It's like, those are the number one hard skills that you need to have when you're working in a technology environment. Not saying going down to the details of coding or understanding how a specific piece of software works, but understanding very high levels. You can have those informed and educational discussions, with your counterparts, and bring that side of yourself to the table, and not necessarily thinking that, hey, this is a tough piece, this is a tough technology or software that I'm not going to understand. Try to get your hands a little dirty, and you'll be surprised as how much you can grasp and how much you learn through that process.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, like I said earlier, like we continue to stay in the way of our own success. So I think it's time we look past that and ask the questions that we needed to get us sort of the right knowledge that we needed to do better in our roles. Laura, right? I have a question for you. The customer service industry, which has a majority of female workforce, is at the cusp of transformation, thanks to conversational AI and an array of automation tools that are in place. As a leader in that space, what's your advice to sort of the agents, support agents? What do you think will change in their roles and the jobs with sort of the maturity of AI? And then do you see new roles emerging in this space?
Absolutely. So let's start off with just a statistic. There's a lot of them out here on the future of AI and contact center, but Kearney estimates that because of AI and robotic process automation, solutions are going to be reducing the amount of time customer service agents actually spend on processes by 25% in 2022, and then by 40% in 2027. So what that means is that in the back end, you're going to have data being served to you to be able to better personalize the conversation with your customers. You're going to have a full thread and more omni-channel. Okay, this person's been already talking with a customer service agent over chat, it's got handed over, and I'm speaking over phone call, things of that nature. So what is important and advice is educating yourself. I'm just going to build on what all the amazing women have already said, is understanding what's happening on the back end and actually creating your own point of views and recommendations. Like one of the things that you can do is there's academies out there. I'll pitch UIPath. We have an academy with all free learning on robotic process automation and how that works, but many other companies do as well, and non-company tied. You have Udemy, you have other places. By learning that, you start learning what's happening when you actually speak to a customer and the software. And so start breaking that down, because what you can do then is start having recommendations of what data do I want to see to make my job better? How could this process be better? And then more importantly, what is a customer experience going to look like that could be better? So the jobs of the future will be not only they'll still have in-person agents that are going to be able to speak to you, but more importantly, you're going to have roles of managing these processes, managing these systems, putting in that customer journey and that happy path. The happy path is not linear. It is this web of pathways that people are going to get the help they need. And so learning about that, investing in that's going to be the most important thing, and having a voice. I have to say, I spend a lot of time with end users trying to gather that data and viewpoint from an agent, like in a call center, to understand what can be improved. And you're the people to do it.
Thank you, Laura. I will pivot to Charlotte. Charlotte, as someone who's seen the industry sort of go through massive shifts, what do you think helped you stay ahead of the curve and make you sort of the leader with respect to some of the skills in the industry, right? Can you speak a little bit more about your journey from being a support agent, and what does that look like?
Yeah, I was very kindly reminded a few days ago that I've been in support for 28 years.
I didn't bring that up, Charlotte. I specifically did
Definitely
not.
wasn't me. But I've decided to own that, and you're right, things have changed quite significantly in that time. And I did start in a technical role and have gone on to lead technical teams. Over the last 28 years, I've been in some very in the company of some very technically capable people, and at points in my career I've certainly counted myself among them. Less technical nowadays, but my growth has happened in different areas as is necessary, because I'm doing a different task. I have a different role to fulfill. Staying ahead of the curve, though, I think is about being committed to your own learning and growth. And in some ways, this echoes all of the answers we've just had. It's simply a matter of saying to yourself, I am not going to be a dinosaur. I am not going to be the one in the room who doesn't understand what is going on. And sometimes that is, you have to get your hands dirty and kind of get in among, like, I not so long ago, I was doing like Jira configuration, which was a bit uncomfortable for me, but got there. But also just asking questions. You're surrounded by smart people, and they all know their jobs better than you. So don't be afraid to ask questions. And I have asked some very senior engineers some very silly questions and literally asked them to step me through every single thing so that I can get to the bottom of understanding what it is and how I can fit into this and make this situation better and help out. So it's kind of, don't be a dinosaur and commit to your own learning in any way you can get it. Lean on people, lean on resources. Do the thing yourself sometimes. If you have time to do that, that's great too, because there's nothing better than doing. But definitely learn, talk to people and soak it up.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. I find myself doing exactly the same thing, which is asking a lot of silly questions that I will sometimes find myself prefacing with saying that I'm asking a very silly question. I may have heard the answer before, but even then I have absolutely no shame in asking something very basic, because that's how you continue to learn until it sticks. Because everybody learns differently and there is no shame in that. So I love that, Charlotte. So one of the questions that I was asked here within the chat that came directly to me was, since given the fact that there's a lot of men that are joining this webinar, which is great and phenomenal to see that, what would you like to say to the people who can be advocates for women in leadership positions, and what should they start doing or should continue doing? It's a very interesting question and a very powerful one and a very genuine one. And I think my advice for the men, what is the role of men in International Women's Day, and not just International Women's Day, it is every day, right? Is to reflect on your biases, be very intentional about leaning in, look at your team composition, something as simple as that. What changes can you make that are more immediate? And something that was said earlier, right? Like, don't interrupt, celebrate the successes of the women that are around you. Even starting off with something as basic as that can empower the teams that are around you and that surround you, right? And you'll see that the value that brings to the table is just amplified when women are given the space that they need to lead and to succeed as well, right? with that, I'd like to take the last 5 minutes and to talk about the future. And this has been a phenomenal discussion. I think I've had a lot of takeaways from this, right? Which I will wrap up here in a minute. But I'd love to hear one last sort of thought from all the panelists here is, what is your prediction you have for the future of customer service or customer experience? And I'll start with Anastasia.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. We all, I think, care about. I think that we are at a point already where experiences do matter a lot. So it's no longer an option to just offer a great product or service at a reasonable price. It just has to be something more than that. Customers want to make sure that the values of the brand do make sense to that customer, that they want to know that they are associated, if they choose this brand, with something bigger than just a product. So this is not future. This is like already the reality. I think in terms of future, what customers will want is personalization, especially with how we are seeing big, huge brands, huge companies, and the general globalization of many things, of many industries. I think what will become important is, with all the benefits that a global brand can provide, which is the level of quality that you can get in any city, in any part of the world, and different, very advanced products and services, people will want to feel like treated like individuals. They will want to be, and this is, I think, something that we all feel as we become customers of small businesses, of family-owned businesses and little companies, like going to a coffee shop where not only you get great coffee, amazing quality, but also the bartender knows you and greets you and knows what kind of coffee you like and what type of milk you prefer. I think that this is how customers will want to be treated when it comes to huge brands as well. And so I think that the part of like future customer experience is figuring out how to personalize the experience, how to make customers feel valued, how to recognize their loyalty and make them see it, and let them feel that brand does care about every single customer, even if this brand has 20 million customers all over the world. I think this is the future, and I guess this is the biggest challenge for those of us who are in that space.
+1, Anastasia. Absolutely agree with you over there. And I think humanizing the experience is absolutely critical, no matter what the size of the organization is or the customer base there is. Tanya, let's hear from you. What are your thoughts on the number one prediction you have for the future of customer experience?
Yeah. If you don't mind, I would like to share two future predictions. First of all, yeah, first of all, agree with everything that Anastasia said. One of the brands that came up to my mind was IKEA. Right from your entry into IKEA to how you're treated once you're exhausted shopping, they have this place where you can just relax and eat food and do other things than shop for your breakfast, your morning cereal. Like, it's just the entire experience right to your exit when you come back to the company again, if something doesn't work or you're not able to fix the product. So they just remind me of just taking into account the holistic experience in play. But in terms of future, like we all know, future of customer service is going to be pushing customers online, just because of the ease and convenience it brings to our users and consumers, but also for the service reps too. Rather than being confined to call centers, service reps will have more and more tools that they can use to work remotely. It's no longer going to be like, hey, come to the office because you can access your phone from here, you can access the software from here. It's all going to be centralized, it's all going to be automated, it's all going to be remote. And the second thing that I would say is there's more and more automation that's going to happen in the customer service space, where service reps are going to be more focused on doing things that require more intellectual power and not just doing mundane things like how to do X. hey, everyone knows how to do X. I don't actually have to take a call to tell you that. I can actually send you to an automated system that can tell you. But if you'd want to know more intellectual, anything that requires more empathy in terms of if something getting canceled, I'm upset with the service, that's where really humans add value. So I think there's going to be that piece around just going back to, talking about humanizing and also automating. There are going to be more and more pieces that are automated so humans can actually do what they're good at, which is empathizing and bringing new products and new services to life.
I love that. Help humans do better what they're good at already. So that's very powerful, Tanya. Charlotte, what is your prediction?
I think that for people on the front line talking to customers, we're going to extend much more into a space where we're really truly partnering with our customers to find solutions for them that exist outside of the box that we're currently often operating in now, which is a box where we are asked a question or presented with a problem and we deliver the answer. We're going to get much more into a space where we're delivering whole solutions in a much more collaborative way with our customers, I think. And this rests on everything you were saying, Tanya, around relating to them as human beings and doing more than just sending them a knowledge-based article or whatever, or sending them a form to fill in that will solve their problem for them. So I think it is going to be much more consultative, and I think that is where we can really relate to each other as human beings and solve bigger problems for our customers than they either knew they had when they came to us, or and also kind of preempt problems for them as well, like preempt solutions for them as well. So I think solving problems that are bigger than customers originally come to us with.
That is awesome. Being more consultative and preempting the problems. That's great, Charlotte. Laura, I think we have 2 more minutes left and just enough time for you to give us your predictions for customer experience, customer service.
Absolutely. With all this automation and all these systems communicating, there's got to be a really fine-tooth comb someone's taking to look at that. I recently moved, and if you've done anything like that where you've had to change all your subscriptions, I spent hours listening to the same music, hearing the same go to the website, hearing all these things that I was going to rip my hair out one day. I think I did 12 hours of calls. So the point being is that someone's got to be thinking through, we're a subscription economy and everyone's really tired of the customer service experience with all this great technology. It's really powerful, but someone's got to be, or a group of people looking at that customer journey so it's rewarding, because otherwise they're gonna cut the cord.
There's an idea for the entrepreneurs on the call right here, Laura, to come up with a new subscription-based methodology on this call. Thank you so much. I cannot thank you enough, Charlotte, Anastasia, Laura, Tanya, for taking time out and providing this invaluable feedback. I know that I have learned a few things that I will apply in my life. So I will certainly be sure to stay in touch. And for all of our audience, right, the session is going to be recorded and is going to be up on our Netomi's website. Feel free to listen in and feel free to give us any of your feedback or anything you'd like to hear in some of the next monthly sessions that our team is planning on doing. So with that, I'd love to have everybody here on the panel just do the whole pose that we have for International Women's Day, if you'd like. And then we can safely wish everybody a great and a successful International Women's Day and a Women's Year, in fact. Thank you, everyone.